You know, I've seen a lot of talk lately about Pokemon Home and its integration to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and today I think it's time we take a step back, look at some of the facts and things that we know, and make an educated guess about when Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is actually coming to Pokemon Home. So let's get to it and take a look and see just how quickly Pokemon Home is going to be arriving. But before we can talk about Pokemon Home, we actually have to talk about 7-star Terra raids, and take a journey back to December of 2022 for the first 7-star Terra raid with Charizard the Unrivaled. So our journey to Pokemon Home actually begins with this guy, Charizard the Unrivaled, which was the first 7-star Terra raid that came out in December of 2022. And the reason this is important for Pokemon Home is when this guy's raid came out, there was a content update to the game. The content update to the game not only added 7-star Terra raids to the game, but also added a whole slew of Pokemon to the game that were not in the game before and were unavailable to be caught. That included these guys right here. So we ended up with a whole bunch of Hisuian forms of Pokemon, but we also ended up with a ton of starters as well. Now, obviously, Charmander was not one of the starters in here because Charizard was already in the game, but we did have Scorbunny in the game at that point. His code was in the game, and people at that point actually found ways to essentially bring him forth into the game, along with all of these other guys. And since then, Game Freak has followed this pattern. Every 7-star raid has been one of these Pokemon that is in this box that is not a Hisuian form. It has been a starter. So for example, after Charizard, we ended up with Cinderace. Cinderace was coded into the game already at that point, and you could get him. I didn't have him at this point. Following Cinderace, we had Greninja. Froakie was already coded into the game at this point. I had a box full of Froakies before Greninja ever came out. After that, we ended up with Pikachu for Pokemon Day, which we knew Pikachu was in the game already. That was nothing surprising. After Pikachu arrived, however, we ended up with Decidueye, with Rowlet being in the game already. With Rowlet being in the game, after that, we ended up with Samurott, Oshawott being in the game already at that point. And after Samurott, we ended up with Typhlosion, with Cyndaquil being in the game already at that point. So after Typhlosion, we ended up with the current 7-star Pokemon. We ended up with Inteleon. Now, with Inteleon wrapping up here shortly at the time of the video, or the time of release of this video, that leaves us with 3 starter Pokemon left out of the original batch that was added during this content update. The first of which being Chestnut, everybody's favorite big bulky boy, Delphox, our favorite magical fiery fox, and everybody's favorite Gen 8 starter, Rillaboom. Just like that. So these are the last 3 starters left out of this batch of Pokemon whose code was added to the game during that December content update. Now, with that knowledge in mind, let's talk about how this translates to Pokemon Home coming to Scarlet and Violet. When we're talking about Pokemon Home's integration into Scarlet and Violet was originally announced during the Pokemon Day Presents presentation way back at the end of February. And during that, we ended up with this slide that said Pokemon Home coming early 2023. However, there's something very important to note here. This is what the North American audience saw, and what most of the English-speaking world saw. But in Japan, the translation was different. It did not say early 2023, it said spring 2023, which can create some confusion here, as spring does technically run until the 21st of June. So we're not technically out of spring yet, and we're very far past early 2023. But there's a little bit of confusion there. Now with that, let's talk about how the game plan kind of looks like it's going to work out for us to get Pokemon Home in Scarlet and Violet. So now that we've covered everything that we know so far leading up to this point, let's talk about the timeline for Scarlet and Violet's integration with Pokemon Home. At this point, it looks like we have 3 7-star Terra raids left, with Chestnut, Delphox, and Rillaboom being the last trio coded into the game in that original content update all the way back in December. And one thing that we can pretty much assume here is that Game Freak is not going to put that content into the game, like the actual code for the Pokemon into the game, and not use them in some way or another. It would make no sense for them to put all 3 of these Pokemon into the game and then not do them as 7-star terror raids when you could just transfer them in as soon as Pokemon Home becomes available. So with that being said, Game Freak's current pattern for terror raids looks a little something like this. You get an announcement for the next 7-star terror raid, then you get the week 1, there's about a 4-day break, then you get the week 2 for that raid, followed by the announcement for the next raid, and so on and so forth, and repeating. At the time of release of this video, Inteleon raids should be finishing up tomorrow, which means we should be getting an announcement for the next 7-star terror raid on May 7th. That would put one of these 3 raids running from May 11th through the 14th for Wave 1, and then Wave 2 would run May 18th through the 21st. That would be our first raid. That would also put the second 7-star terror raid of these last 3 Pokemon running from the 25th of May to the 28th of May, and then from the 1st of June through the 4th of June. On the 4th of June, we should get our announcement for our next, or the last of the 7-star terror raid Pokemon that are currently in the game, meaning that that raid would run from the 8th of June through the 11th of June, and from the 15th of June through the 18th of June, putting us right at that timeline for the end of spring 2023, as the last day of spring is June 21st. So, given that information, I think it's safe to assume that it's probably going to be mid to end June before we see Pokemon Home make its way into Scarlet and Violet. Because as we all know, Game Freak tends to do things with a purpose, and they never really leave anything to chance. And I know there have been some rumors floating around online that, integration may be coming as soon as May 12th or anything like that. But from my point of view, it doesn't make sense for them to code these Pokemon into the game, the starters that they've been using for every 7-star terror raid, and just not use the last 3. So, there you have it. Those are my thoughts. That is my predicted roadmap, my estimate of when we will be getting Pokemon Home integration and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And as always, this is just my opinion, but given the facts that we have, given the data that we can go back and look at, and what Pokemon are left to be available in the game, it does look very likely that the week of June 21st, we will most likely see a Pokemon Home update that allows us to start transferring our favorite Pokemon into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comments below of when you think Pokemon Home is actually going to come to Scarlet and Violet, and what's the first Pokemon you're going to transfer into the game. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.